Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome to the stage for a more contemporary reflection, the great man, Ron Barassi. That's an interesting tie you're wearing, Ron, just to start on from a lateral angle.
Well, it is for purpose. I am a life member of 4 clubs, and you might think that's an insult in a way, but in my case, I don't think it is. I loved all the clubs I was at. So when it comes to today and I want to wear a tie rather than insult somebody, I've gone with a mixture. There's all the colours of all the clubs on the tie.
I want to see a bit more navy blue. Such a great thing that you're here, such a great thing that many of your players from 1970 are here, and we wish them all the sort of day that you'd expect they will have. Perhaps it's an even greater thing, and I shouldn't let this moment pass, that 3 members of the Collingwood team are here. 40 years on, and no doubt it still burns. They've spoken about it, it's been written about. But I think before we talk with Ron, we should welcome Ross Twiggy Dunn, Peter McKenna and Des Tuddenham. And they will join us on the stage a little bit later on, but you've always got a feel for the vanquished foe, Ron, and I know I've spoken to you about 1958. That still burns for you, the time Collingwood beat Melbourne when you were hot favourites, and you can imagine what it would be like for the Collingwood fellas who lost it that day in 1970.
I can imagine that, and I'm very glad that you did. You got in just before me, sitting at my table there, not my table, the table where I'm at, sorry. I think it's fantastic they come. It would take a bit of thinking about and a bit of courage, really, to come. Not that they'd be scared, but they've got to cop it again, sort of thing. That thread of thought might come through, but they're still here. That's fantastic.
It is indeed. Speaking of courage, did it take courage to make that change at half-time to take Bert Thornley off and bring Ted Hopkins on?
No, win or lose, whether he was on or off, I was going to come to no physical harm. No, it didn't take. Courage is probably not the right word. But I do remember after the win, Jack Rout, who was chairman of selectors, he grabbed hold of me at the dance victory dance we had that night, and said, "Now, Ron, you didn't make that move just until the time where we couldn't interfere with the decision, from the match committee." He was chairman of the match committee, and I said no, I didn't do it for that reason. But I really had this strong feeling, urge, I'm not sure what you would call it.
Intuition.
Intuition, okay. That's another good word for it, but I said, no, we've just got to do this now. And Bert Thornley's here today. Where are you, Bert? Where is he?
Bert Thornley, isn't it great to see him in the audience?
It's the sort of thing a coach has to do, no matter whether he's the greatest mate in the world or not. It doesn't matter. It doesn't come into this thing. You're doing the best for the team. That's your job.
Are they coaching all the intuition out of the game these days? Because that was a moment of sheer instinct, I reckon, wasn't it?
Well, I don't think changes at half-time. I think instinct can come into it still today, but the one that not worries me the most, but the one where I sort of have a bit of a giggle in a way, is when a guy kicks a fantastic goal during the game. It's a needed one, it's a brilliant one, and he goes straight to the field.
You started it when you dragged Malcolm Blight, didn't you, when he kicked a left-foot goal from the boundary line?
Malcolm who?
Tell him you said that.
Yeah. Well, that's another question altogether.
Well, that bit we saw on the screens was 15 years after the event. It's now 40 years after the event. What does it mean in your life these days, that amazing day, which I suppose I'm biased, but I think fair-minded football historians would say is the most significant day in the history of the game, just as a one-off match. How does it feel to have played such an important part in it?
Well, to be honest, I don't see how you see significance. It was a comeback, but there have been comebacks of that stature, size, and in such a surprising way in the past. But I think where this one adds to it a little bit is the teams involved. Two very, very famous Australian Victorian teams, maybe the most famous or infamous in Collingwood. So that might help too. Plus over 120,000 people, the biggest sports crowd ever in Australia at a stadium. Perhaps that might add to it too. But I don't know that apart from that, you've got your opinion, I've got mine.
Well, yeah, 44 behind in a grand final. That had never happened, and it's never happened since. It was the biggest crowd in history, the two biggest clubs.
Well, it was exciting. And sometimes I'm asked which of my 4 premierships as a coach do I like the most, and I can go through the whole 4, and all the 4 have got, for me, special reasons. But I usually end up with 70 as the best one, Yeah. And today, of course, in amongst all the Collingwood people, Carlton people here, that'll be right.
Do you enjoy coming back and sharing a bit of the old navy blue all these years later?
I enjoy seeing my old players, yes. I do very much do that. Unfortunately, because I played all of my football without a helmet, sometimes my memory isn't as good, and I should really remember players' names, and I don't. And they could be very close, who I haven't seen for a while. But I can't help that. I hope they accept my "I'm sorry" as a genuine thing, but it's still embarrassing. I've got another 3 or 4 years to get used to that before I don't worry about it.
And what about through the blurred mists of time which affect everybody? Is there a moment from 1970 that shines for you, that stands out?
Well, I know that when I stepped down from the coach's box up in the MCC members area, an elevated position there where they did that, I really had a strong feeling that any sign of talking about, apart from fixing things up, the first half was going to be pointless. I gave the players a bit of general advice when I got into the rooms, and then the match committee met, and we made some significant changes. We hear about Teddy and Bert, but there are another 3 or 4 at least significant changes that we did make, and nearly all of them, in fact, I think all of them worked. But I went into the rooms with a very strong attitude towards fixing it, not rather than lamenting, because lamenting at a time that doesn't help. You might feel better. I don't know about that. You might feel better, but it doesn't help, for God's sake. Sorry.
It's a big, long room, isn't it? And I know the sound on the far wings is not absolutely 100%, but if you could bear with us on the outer reaches while we do just wrap up this little conversation. And I want to ask you about the handball, because you have resisted the notion that you started it, and you've always said that Len Smith started it. But there's no doubt in my mind that following the 1970 grand final, there was something of an explosion. The game became a more attacking game. You've only got to look at the scoring through the 1970s to see that it became much freer. Scores were much higher. And it would seem to me that 1970, in a sense, did change the game. Perhaps Big Nick had an impact too when he turned the team upside down and went all attack in 1972. But these do become seminal moments in the way in which the game is played through the era that follows.
I agree with all that. No doubt people like myself and Big Nick, Barry Cable, trying to think of another person now.
Get Blighty a run. You bagged him once, so you can put him in there as well. Oh, keep going.
No, I don't know who you said.
Blighty.
What does he have to do with handball?
I don't know, but you were just talking about some of these great attacking players. I thought I'd just try and patch it up.
Look, we've patched up a long while ago. We've lived together since. No, I just feel that the handball thing, it did start with this genius of football, who I believe is the father of modern football, Len Smith. You might say, who the hell's he? Well, he did coach. He played with Melbourne, then he went to Fitzroy, became coach at Fitzroy, was coach at Richmond. Unfortunately, had to pack it in halfway through a season because of illness. Didn't achieve the coaching premierships. He never had one, but he is amongst a lot of football people known as one hell of a footy person. And I was fortunate enough to work with him for 7 years, not side by side, but in a firm of 400 or 500 people, and we played junior cricket together. And so I was good friends with Len, who was Norm's brother. I went past his place one day and he said, "Ronnie, come in." So I go in there and he said, "This will give you an idea of how his mind worked, because you don't get to have a gong called the father of modern football without some brain effort going into it naturally." So in I go to his office and he said, "Now, how quickly could you score a goal in? How many seconds?" And I've done a quick calculation, 8, 9, 10. He said, "Let's go through it. Time starts when the ball hits the deck from the bounce. It goes up, it comes down. What if the ruckman hits it right along the centre line, straight to a person going through at full pace who takes it cleanly, and as soon as he takes it cleanly, he reverts all of his concentration into making sure his long kick is going to be a good kick." So that's another 4 or 5 steps, 3 or 4, whatever. He hits it towards the goal square, and the guy goes up there and hits it down straight to a person going past at full speed who kicks a goal. So he's described all that, and I said, "Oh, all right, yeah, fair enough." He said, "I reckon that'd take about 6 seconds." And I said, "Right." Then I was sort of looking at him, I said, "Well, so bloody what?" He said, "Well, that means you can score 10 goals a minute." That's the way his brain... He wasn't an idiot, don't worry about that. He just threw that in a bit of relief.
Well, a stat that's etched in my mind is 7 goals in 13 minutes, which is what your Blues kicked at the start of the third quarter in that 1970 grand final. Ladies and gentlemen, I remember on the back of the book called The Coach, which was written about a year with Ron Barassi at North Melbourne in 1977, there was a quote from Lou Richards. I think he said, they called Jock McHale the Prince of Coaches, and Checker Hughes the Dean of Coaches.
You're not going to say Queen, are you?
No, he said Jack Dyer was the Clown Prince of Coaches. He said Ron Barassi is undoubtedly the greatest coach of all time. Ron Barassi, ladies and gentlemen.